Hello, my creepy crew. Miss Story Mystery here with another collection of mysteries and oddities from around the web. In episode 12, I'll be bringing you a number of strange and spooky stories, including a paranormal experience in a dorm room, being warned by ghostly whispers about a fire in the garage, and encountering a horrifying humanoid creature or spirit on a dark mountain road. Sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 12 of Ms. Story Mysteries, Creepy Tales of Mysteries and Oddities. This happened to me about 2 years ago. I have to start by saying that my house is not haunted. I've lived here for nearly 12 years, and my husband has lived here for 15 years, and there has never been anything consistent to make either of us think that there is anything in this house aside from us and our 2 dogs. It was a normal weeknight, and we had just settled into bed for the night. The dogs were downstairs and had already been asleep for a while. Neither of us had been drinking or anything like that. He tends to fall asleep pretty fast, but I have trouble sleeping, so I was just there, wide awake, and thinking I might as well get up. I got as far as actually sitting up in bed, which I feel is important to state because I was not drowsy, dreaming, or anywhere near close to sleeping. But I settled back down because I knew that if I did get up, I wouldn't get to bed until dawn. The moment my head hit the pillow, I felt a hand reach under the duvet from the foot of the bed and take hold of my calf. Before I could even process what was happening, I was being dragged toward the foot of my bed. I could see in the dim light cast by the nightlight outside of the bedroom that the person at the end of the bed looked exactly like me and was wearing an outfit I owned when I was a teenager. Of course, I began screaming, punching my husband in the back and eventually the backs of his legs, trying to wake him up. He didn't even stir. I got bashed into the bed frame before it stopped. Then it was just dead quiet, as though nothing had ever happened. I'm not easily frightened, but that night there was just no way that I was going to stay in bed. Screw that. I got up and stayed in the office looking at anything cute and happy on the internet that I could find. My husband was rightly skeptical when I told him about it the next morning, but he knows that I am not one to make things up. Besides, he was bruised all to hell because I punched him so hard, which begged the question, how did he not wake up? I have turned over every theory in my mind about what I experienced that night, and I still can't figure out what happened, or why a version or a vision of me would try and pull me out of bed. Moved into my dorm a week early freshman year of college. The building was pretty much empty, save a few other students there for sports and career programs. Nobody was in my wing except the RA. Additionally, the dorm was partially burned during a couch fire in 2000. I had been going in and out of my room, which was a single, throughout the week. One night, I came back pretty late after getting dinner with some of the other kids in my program. I opened the door, and the chair is balanced at a 45-degree angle at my desk, as if someone was sitting in it and leaning back. Of course, I freaked the hell out, and the chair tipped forward till it hit the ground as if someone were getting up out of it. I don't believe in ghosts or anything, but that certainly made me question. Never had any other incidents after this. One morning, I was going through my daily routine getting ready for work, which wasn't very long. Wake up, get dressed, brush my teeth, etc. Well, I was brushing my teeth and set my toothbrush down on the front of the sink as I always do to rinse my mouth out. Well, when I went to grab it, and it was just gone. I was dumbfounded. I had just set it down, and it only took a few seconds to get some water to rinse. I searched everywhere in that bathroom, which is extremely small and not much in there. I retraced my steps just to see, and searched everywhere I could think of for a good 15 to 20 minutes before I left, no avail. I told my aunt who I lived with to keep a lookout for it. That night when I got home, we both looked again everywhere. Pulled the sink away, looked in every spot we could think of. Never found it. It just vanished. The bathroom has since been completely redone with everything gutted and still never showed up. It's been about 2 years and still no sign of it. Weirds me out to this day. Home alone when I was around 12 or so. Reading a book when I hear someone calling my name. It was very soft, almost like a wind, but in the house and made me get up to go check it. I walked to the sound coming from the garage. I opened the door to the garage, and it is filled with smoke. There was a small fire in our trash can. I put it out very quickly, but it could have been a lot worse if I didn't check on it. I'm still not sure what the sound was, but I swear it was like I was being called. My daughter's school prom. We had bought a beautiful gown and shoes, and they were hanging safely in her wardrobe. The evening of the prom, she went upstairs to get ready and shouts down to me, "Thanks for getting everything ready for me, Mum." Well, I hadn't been in her room at all. When I went up to see what she was talking about, I found her dress lying on the bed, her shoes next to her dresser, and perfume on her dresser. I didn't say anything so she wouldn't freak out, but it spooked me. After that, there were other instances, like a certain perfume appearing on her dresser, wardrobe doors closing by themselves, etc. After a while, we got used to it and would just say thank you when anything happened. I was on my friend's back porch in his hot tub. We were drinking and smoking, but knew his parents would come home eventually, so we turned all the lights in his house off so that if they had come home, we would know. Through the windows, we see the kitchen light go on, and then the living room light shortly after. So we immediately hide everything and prepare to see his parents. After a while of not seeing anyone, we went inside to see who was home. No one was home. He is an only child, and his parents were still out. 2 light switches were turned upward. We proceeded to search the whole house, but found nothing. To start, our house was built in 1936, and we bought it in 2016. I can't remember how long it was after we moved in, a couple weeks to a couple months, but I decided to take a nap. I was either dreaming or was half awake, half asleep. I felt more of the latter because I thought my eyes were open, but I'm not 100%. And I saw this dark figure at the end of our bed. It was strange because I remember trying to wake up or get up but couldn't. Once I did, nothing was there, but my heart was racing. Anyway, that's the only time I've seen George. Instincts tell me it's male. I kind of feel all the truly creepy ghosts are female, and I'm not getting that vibe. He's still around. He is more active in the warmer months than in winter. He likes to hang out in our finished attic. I'll be up late and hear footsteps walk across the attic. Our cat will rip around upstairs in the middle of the night, so I figure he's playing with her. He likes to move stuff, which is disconcerting sometimes because it takes me by surprise. I went to feed our cat one morning, and her bowl was in a completely different room than it normally is. No one moved it. I checked. I will catch something out of the corner of my eye on the stairs leading to the attic. Things like that. Besides the first encounter, he's been a decent house spirit. Although nobody believes me, I know what I saw, and it wasn't a stealth bomber. I was about 14, and at about 10:30, I was in bed trying to fall asleep on a school night. I started to hear a hum that quickly began to grow in intensity as whatever was making it got closer. So I bent the blinds on the window behind me and peered out. Something bright was steadily approaching, and it was flying very low. As it got closer, I began to see more detail. In the middle was a bright, white sphere It had long shafts coming out radially from the central sphere. At the end of each of these shafts, maybe 10 to 15 in total, was a smaller sphere, each illuminated with a different color, noticeably dimmer than the central sphere. It zoomed right overhead. Couldn't have been more than 20 feet over my house. I ran downstairs and told my parents. They told me to go back to bed. Next day I told my friends and teachers. They laughed at me. They suggested it was probably a stealth bomber because there's an Air Force base nearby, and stealth bomber sightings aren't rare. This thing was the opposite of stealthy. So, I have no idea what it was, but I'll never forget the night I saw the Psychedelic Sombrero. I live on a small mountain that has some thick forests surrounding my development, and we get a lot of wildlife that roams the streets. No big deal. One night I get home from a friend's house and get out of my car when I heard some shuffling coming from the bushes near my shed. When I looked up, I saw the most ominous-looking, huge black figure, and it shot shivers down my spine. As I was looking at it, I was terrified and wanted to run, but my body was paralyzed. I was literally petrified. The figure, so I thought, seemed to be moving closer, and my body getting stiffer and stiffer with every passing moment. And then my mother pulled into the driveway. I was snapped out of the trance I was in, looked back over at my shed, and there was nothing there. I lived downtown in a basement apartment, but they used those window-type blocks to frame the bathroom door so enough light would come through to see by. I woke up one night and noticed my boyfriend was standing at the end of the bed near the bathroom door. I propped myself up on my elbows and waited a few seconds. He didn't move, so I told him to come back to bed and then rolled over to fall back to sleep. I then promptly sat bolt upright when I realized my boyfriend hadn't stayed over that night, and I was alone. The figure gone. Once I was with my boyfriend and a friend of ours from college. It was the first day of winter break, and we decided to drive to the coast after our friend got off work, which was later at night, and then have a bonfire on the beach and have hot cocoa because it was cold. On the way back, we drove through the coastal mountains, and the way we drove there weren't towns, rest stops, etc. for a good 50-mile stretch. We're driving through this stretch at about 3 a.m., and then out of the snowy, frozen forest, this dude, covered in bandages, runs out onto the road out of nowhere and keeps running alongside the car. We're driving highway speed, so he is running fast, and it was super creepy. Then he just ducks back into the trees again and is gone. We all kind of are silent for a moment, and then ask, "So you guys saw that, right?" And we all had. Months later, I was at a local bookstore, and I came across a book about local hauntings while I was waiting for my brother to finish shopping. I thumbed through it, and there was a chapter called Bandage Man about a ghostly figure who haunts that section of the highway and even sometimes causes crashes. My stepmom has this weird story about how when she was a kid, she would always complain to her parents about a man digging outside her window. A few years ago, a friend bought a new house and moved into it. I asked him how the move was going and how he likes the house. He said he loved it, but strangely, his daughter keeps saying that there is somebody digging outside her window at night. I thought that was funny, so I told my stepmom. Turns out, my friend bought and moved into my stepmom's childhood home, and his daughter was living in my stepmom's old bedroom. So, same house, same bedroom, Same weird phenomenon of a little girl complaining about a man digging outside the window at night, although the stories are separated by decades. I was living alone at the time and ended up staying awake until pretty late. I decided to go lay down and watch some YouTube videos until I fell asleep. I ended up pulling the covers up past my head since I was a bit chilly. After like an hour of laying there trying to fall asleep, I went to move my hand up to my head. As soon as I did, I felt something close very slowly around my wrist and then let go. It freaked me out. It felt like the room went silent, my entire body went cold, and I started breathing extremely heavily and was unable to control it. I got up and walked out of the room and then turned on every single light in the apartment. I kept trying to console myself, laughing at my reaction and trying to explain it as I was just half asleep and had a muscle spasm. But then I got really worried that something actually had grabbed my arm. That thought sent me into a full-blown panic attack, and I started sobbing hysterically and getting a feeling like my heart was skipping beats. So I threw on some jeans and put on my boots without socks and my jacket without a shirt, drove to the urgent care parking lot down the street just in case, but just went and stayed with some friends instead. It took me a couple days to build up the courage to go back to my place, and I ended up sleeping on the living room couch for a few months until my lease ended. I used to see shadow people when I was younger, around 11 to 12-ish. Would regularly see a man wearing a hat, but was just a solid shadow. The odd thing is, I was never really scared of him, even though he would just randomly appear and just seem to stare at me and then just as quickly vanish if I ever tried to get closer to him. The only time I ever felt scared was when he would visit me at night while I was in bed and would just stand over me staring. I would just close my eyes and pretend to be asleep until he disappeared. One day, he appeared during the daytime, and I was feeling extra brave for some reason, and decided I had had enough of him just staring at me all the time. I kind of just boldly walked up to him, and he again vanished so fast, it was like he was never there. After this last incident, though, I never did see him again. It's almost like he knew I was sick of it and just left. Still remember all of this vividly to this day. Never did tell my parents or anyone else about it. I was staying with my grandparents for a week or two over my summer break years ago during my school years. It was a nice summer day outside, fairly warm and with no wind at all. My grandparents were going into town to pick up something for dinner and asked if I wanted to come, but I wanted to stay behind. Anyway, they were gone for a little bit, and I was sitting in my grandfather's recliner in their living room, drawing or reading, can't remember which it was. As I sat there, I felt this cool, gentle breeze along my cheek and my neck, and I suddenly smelled a really strong smell of perfume. It was so strong that it was as if someone had dumped out a bottle of perfume on the coffee table in front of the chair or something. I jumped up and looked around for a source, but couldn't see anything. It was worth noting that there was no perfume anywhere near where I was in the house, and all of the windows in the living room were shut. When I had jumped up and looked for a source of the breeze and smell, I felt incredibly uneasy. Unexplainably so. I just didn't feel safe. So I got the hell outside and stayed on the front deck for several minutes until I calmed down. I went back inside. I opened all of the living room windows and turned the TV on and just tried to get myself back to normal. Worth noting, I slept right above the kitchen in the guest bedroom, and I'd hear noises downstairs late at night sometimes. It sounded like footsteps and things being moved around in the kitchen. I remember telling my grandmother once, but she said that the house was just old and settling at night. I knew what she meant by that, and it's not what I'd hear at night. It literally sounded like there was someone snooping around. Some nights I felt afraid to try and fall asleep because I felt like I was being watched, but I never saw anything in the room with me. To make this go from 10% creepy to at least 50%, they lived right across the road from a very old and large cemetery at the time. Also, my mother used to say that when she was younger and still lived at home, it's the same house she grew up in, she'd hear footsteps coming downstairs when she was home alone. After they moved into the house of my grandfather's uncle when he passed away, I stayed with them for another summer or two before I grew out of it. Never had any issues at all with the new house, ever. Was in a hotel in Mexico the last night before leaving. I was with my sister, aunt, and grandparents, so I was stuck having to sleep in the living room on the couch. I wasn't bothered, it wasn't a big deal. Fast forward to that night, after hanging out in the city for a bit. I'm lying there trying to go to sleep when I just get this off feeling. At first, nothing happened. It was just this feeling of slight fear, paranoia, like I wasn't alone. As time passed, I began to calm down, when suddenly something breathes down my neck. I instantly shot up and looked behind me, but the weird thing was, a wall was behind the couch. No window behind me either. No vent, no nothing. At the time, though, I still wasn't too freaked out, just startled. A few minutes later, though, I start to see some weird things in the kitchen. Nothing moving itself, but just weird, what seemed like black figure type things, barely peeking around the corner. It was at this point that I definitely started to get freaked out, and after staring at them for a few minutes, the weirdest thing in my life happened. I don't know how to explain it. It was like I came out of a trance. I felt just this weird wave go through my body, and suddenly it felt like a bunch of time passed, and I was suddenly in a cold sweat when I wasn't just 1 second before. I had my AirPods in the whole time, though, listening to music, and I knew that, in fact, no time had passed because my music stayed the same the whole time. It was at this point that I knew something was in the living room with me, and still being relatively young at the time, I ran into the room my aunt and sister were in and slept on the floor. I was around 9 or 10 at the time this story happened. My best friend and I had been riding our bikes, just being kids and screwing off. We lived in one of those older towns that are filled with older homes and kind of compacted, so the roads turned to dirt and fields pretty quick. We were maybe 5 or 6 blocks from my house when we found a new road to explore, and we followed it down. We passed a church, took an L turn, and were basically out of town and in the country in a few feet. You could see an old bridge a ways down, so we took off to check it out. The ride from the turn to the bridge was a little less than a half a mile. As we got closer and closer to the bridge, I start to notice something is wrong with it. It's an old metal and concrete bridge. The metal's painted red, but it's peeling pretty badly, and the whole thing is leaning heavily to the left. There are 2 big piles of rock blocking each side of the bridge, and we stop our bikes at the first one. It's really quiet, and I immediately want to leave this place. Hated being there from the start. My friend calls me a chicken and gets off her bike and climbs the first rock pile. I refuse to leave my bike, even when she spots an armadillo and chases it barking. As she hits the rock pile on the other side of this bridge, it's like she suddenly senses what I do. She slowly turns, and she is pale as F, saying we need to leave. I don't argue, just wait for her to get back, because I'm not leaving her, and we take off. The whole ride to the bridge was easy. Our wheels glided like they were on the pavement, not gravel. The ride back, though, is like trying to pedal through thick mud. We are both standing up to pedal harder, and it feels like we are just creeping along. We stop about 100 feet away to catch our breath and look back, and there's this huge light, like a mini sun hanging above the bridge. I'm freaking out, and I look at my friend in a "do you see this shit" way, and she looks back terrified and whimpers, "Go, go, go." Neither of us waits. We jump back on the pedals and pedal for all we were worth. We make it almost back to the turn, and this section of the road is lined with trees for a good bit, and I can see something black flashing between the trees right behind us. We hear a vehicle and think adults, so we're safe, at least safe enough to stop for air. We stop and see this truck pulling down a drive and onto the road. About a second later, we forget about the truck. There is now a red rectangle of light, like a tail light gliding about 7 feet off the road, left to right between trees on either side of the road. We are both watching this as the truck pulls up in front of it and stops. And I thought maybe the people in the truck see it too. They probably didn't, because after waiting a good minute for our dumbasses to move out of the road, they honked at us. The honk was all we needed to get our asses back to pedaling home. We never really went exploring too much after that, and spent the rest of the day in the house. I was telling the story later on in my late teens to early 20s, and one of the people in the group was familiar with the road. They had lived on the road not far from the bridge, and weird things would happen in their house. They explained to me that the bridge leads to a drunkard's house. One night, this guy is headed home, completely sloshed, and misses the bridge, hitting the edge and flying into the overfull creek below. They searched for a few weeks and eventually recover his truck, but he's never found. It's one of the creepiest things that's happened to me. I was on an elementary school ski trip, and long story short, I ended up falling down a hill. I stopped about halfway down, and a ranger came to help me get my skis back on and help me get on my way. But as he was helping me, my friends in the ski lift up above were shouting, asking me if I was okay. But they were also asking if I needed any help. I had help, and didn't get why they asked that. So I get up, I leave. I asked some of my friends who were on the lift, and they don't remember seeing a ranger helping me. I also never saw that ranger again that day. In hindsight, it's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. I was once laying in my bed after a long day, but I wasn't really tired enough to fall asleep. After a long day in a noisy environment, I find it really relaxing to just sit back with my eyes closed and listen to all the normal sounds of the house. It's almost like a meditation. After 10 minutes of doing this or so, I feel the normal tension and stress bleeding off, and I realize I can sense something more going on. You know how when someone is in the room with you and your brain picks up on all the little things, like the sound of breathing or clothes shifting, and lets you know? I realized that there were 3 people standing around me, and they were having a clear conversation about someone, which I took to be me. The voices didn't seem hostile or angry, and I became convinced they were there, only to have the whole experience end when I looked around to see where they were. I checked all around the house, and I couldn't find a cause for what I had heard, but for the rest of the night, I would have these moments where someone was watching me that only got more intense the closer to sleep I got. I'm not even sure how I got to sleep that night. That is all for episode 12 of Miss Story Mysteries, Tales of Mysteries and Oddities. I hope you enjoyed hearing these tales. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend to help me out as I grow my channel. And if you have a strange or scary true story that you'd like to share with me, please reach out. Until next time, take care of yourself and allow a little magic and mystery into your life.